Welcome to AfterGate, powered by the Defy Life Network. AfterGate is a podcast series highlighting Colgate alum of color and their professional endeavors after Gate. AfterGate is hosted by myself, Alvin Glymph, aka Al, and Ewan Dubois, aka Jerry. We are doing AfterGate because Colgate University has produced innovators who change the world every day. Yet many alums of color and the mainstream Colgate community are unaware of the amazing accomplishments of alums of color.
What's good, family? To my Colgate peoples, welcome back to another episode of AfterGate. Yours truly, Herman Dubois, also known as Jerry, class of 91, coming to you live from the Sunshine State of Miami. And, tonight, welcome to another episode where we have the myth, the man, the legend, Mr. Alvin Glymph, serving as our guest to share with the listeners a little bit about the Colgate experience. And so we are excited and honored to have Brother Glymph, who's also the visionary of AfterGate, and this is his brainchild. So, I'm thrilled to be a part of this, and welcome to the show, Al.
Yo, what's going on, homie? It's good to
Yes,
be
sir.
here, and really is good to be here. So,
Talk about what's good in the ATL right now.
bruh, man, it's busy, but life is good. Just had an amazing month from my birthday to my daughter graduating to, you came seeing you was awesome. Going up to see, I got a nephew graduating from up in North Carolina and a niece graduating from Winston-Salem up there. That was dope. And then this past weekend, just had an amazing Glimp family weekend. So I'm feeling great right now. Energy's good. And now to think about what we're about to embark on is even more exciting. So ATL is doing good. Life is good.
Amen to that. Amen to that. So we know that the focus of AfterGate is to really engage in discussion with outstanding alumni of color and just sort of take a little trip back into time as we talk about life in the present. But as we reflect about our Colgate experience, why don't you set the stage for our audience and share a little bit about what was happening in that decade, being at Colgate from 87 to 91.
Yep.
You were, in a pivotal time in history, in a pivotal time in your own development as a young black man coming out of Queens, New York. So share a little bit about what were the highlights for you then, 17, 18 years old, entering Colgate.
To me, I look at our life and what we have experienced over our life. I think we've been pretty blessed to just be witness to some amazing instances in world history. But I think part of what I think about at that time is definitely the birth of crack. You can't be someone who grew up in New York City and not appreciate how life changed in that era from the 70s and mid 80s to the birth of crack. It just came a very, very different experience. But also the temptations of a young black man in that time, in terms of whether it's education or this life of quick, fast money and girls, was definitely part of my experience, and it definitely informed who I was as I got to be a student at Colgate. I also think about hip hop, of course, because it's definitely a big part of who I am, who I was back then, and then to be part of that culture, being born, to be part of that era, and just all of it was to be a hip hopper, and then get to a place like Colgate to where so many people either rejected it or wasn't even aware of it was kind of interesting because it was a whole nother type of culture shock or culture, like a rejection of one's culture that people don't appreciate because they don't look at hip hop as a culture. But for me, coming up there, listening to this music, having this um, this style about me, to have this obnoxiousness about me, this refuse to be not listened to about me. So much of that came out of who I was because of the culture of hip hop, and I don't think people recognized that and honored that and didn't know really what to do with those hip hoppers coming up there because it was foreign to them. Um, I think also technology boom is something that has to be taken into consideration. A fax machine was something that was, you know,
A big
in
deal.
a big deal. Like in middle school, junior high school, I don't even know if fax machines existed, but by college they did. And so I think that type of major technology shift was occurring and we didn't even know it. So having a computer at campus was for rich people. Like to have your own desktop computer when we were freshmen was only for wealthy or middle class students. The
We were there when
majority of
Colgate
us,
opened its first computer lab.
correct. We were in the computer lab. That's how we created. That's how we typed our papers. If you remember,
Yeah.
we were the ones who had to either, get there early or be willing to sleep there to get access to a computer. So I think that in itself, like just that shift from low technology to increasing technology is part of also what was happening in the world. And then lastly, I think the AIDS epidemic is also something that was huge. And what makes that so significant is especially when it comes to sexual interaction. We come from we were teenagers being raised by grown men who grew up in a sexual revolution. You know what I mean? Like the 60s, 50s, 70s
70s, yeah.
was a very free sexual time. And so much of that mindset and ways of being was being taught to us by our elders. Yet at the same time, there was this disease, this virus, and that was happening that they did not know where it come from, how,
It
eventually we
transmitted.
learned more and more how it was transmitted. But it was just kind of, you were scared to death. And I think one last thing I want to mention also is um, the racial climate of the country, of the world, I think was also significant. I come out of New York City, a very segregated city, and we were also experiencing
Despite what people
major
think.
racial incidents, despite what people think. Very diverse in terms of the people who actually live there, the demographics of it. But when you think residentially and how the city is experienced, is definitely very segregated. So coming out of New York City as a black male, a male of color, and then you having these racial incidents, whether it's with police or just incidents like Bensonhurst, where people were just beating you because of how you looked, like it was definitely also informed who I was as I got to campus,
Brother, that was the Central Park joggers time frame. That set that became a national story.
without a doubt. And I think I have colleagues who I work with now, and so as those documentary that was coming out, and really it became a real thing in terms of people diving into that story and what happened. I was like, yo, you don't understand how emotional it is for me because it's not just a documentary. It's really something
It's
I
my life.
experienced.
It's my life.
Not just my life now, but it takes me back to the trauma then, because what people don't understand is because of the branding that those guys inappropriately got, it impacted all males of color. And so that if you were a male, African American male, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Haitian, Jamaican, whatever, but if you're that teenager who happens to look like that person, then guess what? People in the
treated
subways, people
treated
on
you
the
as such.
streets treated you as such. So
Hmm.
to be looked at as, I mean, because like I don't think, and I really tried to help my colleagues understand that before social media, what drove how people thought in New York City was the tabloids, the
Hmm.
newspaper,
Hmm.
the New York Post, the Daily News. Like those newspapers definitely had a big influence
Influence.
on people thought. And so when you have white people in New York City seeing this on the news and then thinking, oh man, black kids, kids of color, they're just like crazy. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, now they're looking at us in the same way. And we were now went from just young teenagers to threats.
Mm-hmm.
And that I don't think people can truly appreciate. And it's just not healthy.
So with all that context going on, in coming out of NY, out of the country, the U.S., you mentioned AIDS, which was worldly. Got to slip in Mandela and South Africa and apartheid going on.
Facts.
You talk about like turbulence 101. How did did you see all of that as an obstacle, deterrent in terms of what you accomplished at Colgate for your 4 years? Was it more the fuel that got you through Colgate? But talk a little bit about what your experience was and what you felt you accomplished. What noteworthy accomplishments for Glymph 8791 at the gate, Hamilton, New York, Oneida Valley.
Hmm. I think when you think about when I think about my time at Colgate, the phrase I often use is bittersweet because I think it was definitely good and bad times. And so when I think about the bad times, I think that in my first in our first, since we're the first class, in our first 2 semesters, first 2 years, so 4 semesters, there were four major racial or anti-Semitic incidents on campus that galvanized the campus. So think about
Wow.
that.
Take
While
it back. Take it back.
there are things that are happening now that are incidents for us coming from this New York City to rural Hamilton, New York, we are instantly put into crisis because whether it was the jungle party where where
Kid,
kids
blackface.
saw blackface, and I can't remember them, but I do remember that stat. So do your math. The fact is, this is what happened, and it forced us to be engaged instantly, right? So I think that's part of the negative, honestly, in terms of my experience. I think how polarizing it was when I look back on it, and I think again, it was a very segregated experience. Like we talk about, that we did this documentary, we did a senior project about being an outsider on Colgate's campus. I think for me, that was definitely a negative part of the experience to where um, you were either part of the mainstream or you wasn't.
In or you're
You,
out.
you were either hanging with white people or you wasn't.
You are.
Like you had to make choices, and if you weren't that person who lived that type of life to where you wanted to do all of it, you couldn't. You really couldn't because you was going to be ostracized by somebody. Like, you know, it was really clear to me, at least how I experienced Colgate, that if you ever wanted to date a white woman on campus,
Mm.
you'll never date a sister of color again.
There was consequences to that decision.
There were consequences to that decision.
Yeah.
If you're going to be that person who pledges a white frat,
Yeah. Don't
you're
come to
going
an
to be
HRC
looked at
party.
like that.
Right.
If you're going to be a person who lives in HRC, the mainstream's going to look at you like that. I can remember
Okay, so
coming
wait, hold
back.
on. I'm going to challenge you then because you had a very unique freshman experience living at KED, a predominantly
Correct.
white dorm for all freshmen. So you had two strikes going against you. You were a freshman and you were a man of color in a predominantly white dorm, probably the oldest dorm on campus that had the traditional 2 rooms, box room with a public restroom where you got to wash your butt at the end of the hallway with everybody else.
That was
Okay.
KD, the projects.
That's K. That was like the projects of Colgate. So I've always admired you because I might have got kicked out of school first semester just off the jump, off the rip. How did that play into your experience? Just that's your first semester. How do
Yeah.
you talk
So
about it?
let's talk about it. So first of all, I think it was definitely more welcoming than I would have imagined before I got in there. And that the majority of the students that I interacted with were like students. Some of them I still interact with to this day, like build relationships, build bonds that first year because they, while there was definitely some times where they didn't understand who I was, and I'm the kid with the do-rag bumping the hip hop and blah blah blah. So they're definitely like, we ain't never experienced nobody like you before. But it was, I can't say the majority of them though accepted me for who I was and literally tried to build a relationship with me, even in the midst of me not necessarily trying to conform to who they were, right? Still being Al
or
from,
build a relationship with them.
right. They still trying to kick it with me.
Yeah.
But my reaction to feeling like it was a foreign environment, my reaction to feeling the pressure of, you can't be seen as the guy who's hanging out in KED all the time if you want to be cool with the people down at HRC, and my desire to be in an environment that was really comfortable. I spent a lot of my freshman year hanging out in HRC and really just slept. By my senior year, just kind of slept in KED. And many of the students that I had built a
No, no,
bond with the
by
summer
yourself,
before,
by your second semester, not by
by
your
my
senior year.
by my second semester, correct.
Right,
By my
correct.
second semester. Many of the students I had built a relationship with during the summer, during the OUS summer, scholars program as it was called back
Yeah,
then,
yeah, yeah.
lived in HRC. So, I am just, for many reasons, spades, Monopoly,
Just walking through the hallways and
dating,
hearing hip hop made
all
you
of that.
feel like, okay, they get me.
The people who were listening to my radio show was down there. And so it was a challenge to say the least, but I definitely look at it as something that I'm grateful for because of the opportunity to build relationships with some of those people and kind of see the campus a little differently. And I also am grateful for, long big picture, because that's what the radio station was. So it was also always a easy access to a place that I really felt comfortable, which was the radio show, the radio
Talk
station.
about that because I have to definitely say as a witness, if I have been asked what were some of the greatest all-time Alvin Glymph accomplishments at the gate, RCU Night Flight would have to be up in the top 5. So, but no sense for me to speculate about it. We got the man himself here to talk about what was the whole RCU thing like. What prompted you? What was the motivation behind it? Would you make it?
So, in terms of accomplishment, I think it was years after that I kind of did the math and said, I'm pretty sure I'm the first all rap radio show on Colgate's campus, because I don't remember anything existing before me.
You were the
And
MTV raps of what was those two brothers? Ed
Dr. Dre and
Lover.
Ed Lover, right?
They were that you did that for
Yes.
Colgate.
So, I pioneered that radio. And I think for many alums and students, especially when you think about the accessibility of hip hop now on campus or around the world, that's kind of weird to even think that, damn, there was a time before rap was being played. Yes, there was. And so when I got there, and you remember what it was like being in New York City, how hip hop was part of all that we did, and how, while it wasn't being played throughout the radio all the day, but you did have slots Friday night, Saturday night, some college stations where you could access it. So to get on a campus and it's like, okay, so we got our own radio slots. Cool. Nobody's playing rap music. Wow, that's whack. So what? What do y'all? And so I got introduced to the radio station by my roommate freshman year, Mike Mockler,
At
real cool
KED.
guy out of Albany at KED. He had a radio show. His father actually was in the communication business, so he came up there as a freshman. This is why, having parents and who are doing stuff, and
This
right,
is
right.
why first generation versus second generation, third generation
There's a
matters.
difference.
It
There's a difference.
matters.
So he comes in freshman year. I'm getting on a radio show. Being his roommate, I'm like, yo, that's kind of cool. And I start tagging along and actually become like doing a segment and bringing comedy.
Of course you did, Al.
I'm becoming a segment, right?
He
Like
didn't even
people are
ask. He didn't even know you were
what
gonna
was
help
happening.
his ratings, his show.
Yo, but people are talking about us on campus. Like he's like, yo, somebody in my class mentioned like that they listened to that we was cool. Come on back. And so I become a regular. What happens though is 1 week I take it way too far with my jokes.
I thought you were gonna say you devote the show, but go ahead.
I take it way too far with my jokes. So
Do you
where
remember the joke? Do you remember the
I don't
joke?
remember what it was.
Oh, that would
I
have been
feel like,
classic.
but it was something like it was way over the. I mean, come on again for it to be a college radio where
Give me a
really nobody's
category.
listening.
Was it like
Thank
racial
you.
overtones? Was it gender? Was it sexist? Was it
I think it was
some New
racial.
York
I think it was.
thuggish?
I think it was racial and um, it was racial and something morbid. Like it was just like kind of real disgusting to where RCU got complaints,
Oh wow!
kicked him off the radio show.
Oh, he lost the slot.
He
That's
lost
the
his slot,
worst. That's the worst. From the
and
from the roommate who was just coming through to
from the
hang out.
roommate who's acting an ass on the radio, lost his slot. I get back on RCU because I'm not the radio jock of record
In
in
his slot.
January. In January, like remember J Term when we used to
You
come up there for
Devo
Jan,
the show.
and I'm like, they're like, yo, we got time for night flight. You know, a lot of the seniors not even up there on January,
Right.
so it was real easy for me to like, yeah, I'll do that. And from then on,
That's
had a
good.
radio show, and
Never look
you
back.
know the ability to bring hip hop to my fellow students was really my motivation. Was just really this idea of I love it. I know some of y'all love it. So somebody need to be playing it.
Right.
And then as we started doing it and having so much fun and just I
Listen,
really recognized I enjoyed it, it became definitely part of who I was.
even if it was just all 26 of us on campus, all right, that happened to be able to listen. And then let's keep in mind the radio range reached Morrisville. So you had a Morrisville audience that would, and back in the day, you could call in. Okay, so don't think it was just Hamilton, y'all. If they had just invested a little bit more money in that antenna, we could have reached like Utica
Oh,
maybe or
we could have.
Syracuse.
We could have.
It, Colgate experience might have been a real different scenario.
The I really appreciated my impact when one day I'm hanging out and I'm getting some food from Burger King and somehow a local, a townie, teenage white kid somehow recognizes who I am and tells me that he listens to my show. And
Nice.
I'm like,
Okay. The
wow, that's kind of cool.
original
So
podcast.
you know,
Nice.
so
Nice.
Al Love, Dope Hip Hop Session was the name of the show. Al Love was my call letters, and it was dope. I definitely appreciated, you know, having something to say I did that. You know, definitely kind of cool. But at the time, it was like I said, just a lot of fun and a way to really share the music because it was all music that I was picking, I'm choosing, I'm curating. So it's really an opportunity for me to put a stamp on, yo, this is what I think is dope.
And what's really crazy about that is that young heads today don't really I think they don't have the context to truly appreciate what that took because it's not like now you can go on Google or iTunes and just access music from all over the world. You know, you were writing to label companies, asking them to send you sample records, that you were a
Yep.
college radio station. And I remember like every week new records coming in and album
Yep.
and then not including your mixtapes you'd get in New York City
Yep.
and rig the boom box so you could play
Yep.
the auxiliary cord into the
You got a good memory.
station. Come on, man! I was carrying the crates, baby. I know all that. You know.
Facts of the matter is Colgate was a progressive rock station. So the music, their collection that they were getting from record companies was that genre. And
Yeah.
then most of the other night flight DJs at the time were playing Stevie Wonder, Luther Vandross. Definitely the smooth R&B was their mode. Maybe some reggae, but you know, so I once I saw the system of how it what it took to get free music up there, and I didn't have to come in with all my tapes. I'm like, wait. All I got to do is reach out to a record label and let them know that I'm a DJ at a college rate, and they'll send me joints like that. like just getting released. And they're like, yeah, and jumped on it and started reaching out to Cold Chillin' and just all of those old school labels. And next thing you know, I'm getting Big Daddy Kane records. I'm getting KRS One records that were being released at the same time as other major radio stations. So it became definitely an easier way than me bringing all of my tapes to the show and hooking up the aux cord and playing it like that, because that's how we were playing music at back then.
I mean, just the RCU experience sounds amazing. As and without even it being intended to be an accomplishment, it definitely was. Would you highlight? Well, are there any other? I mean, that was what spring semester freshman year. You just started. You still got 3 more years of ruckus
Right.
at Colgate. What else is a
So
standout for you as accomplishments?
I think definitely the friendships that I would be part of it, but I think the other major accomplishment was meeting my wife. So I
Oh,
think having to leave Colgate and then have a Colgate couple be have found the my wife of now almost 26 years, mother of my kids. We've been dating since her freshman year. Like I think that's something also that I look fondly back on in terms of what was part of what made Colgate so special was meeting Gina and to again meet her before her freshman year, to meet her really during
oh,
her OUS summer, and then just to
you just
have
been doing some.
identified her.
Were you just doing some research on campus during that summer, or you just,
Exactly.
it
Exactly.
was a diverted road trip, and you was like, ah, it's 4 hours
It was
north.
an intentional road
We'll
trip.
take that route.
It was an intentional road trip where I was doing some intentional research because
Reconnaissance.
after my freshman year, understanding how competitive it was to date a small pool of women of color,
Mm.
having having the seniors, juniors in terms of the pegging order to even be ahead of me. I came up with a strategy of what if
Got to get the
I
edge.
went up there during OUS summer, get them before they introduce myself, before they get on campus where other brothers have a chance.
Right.
This way, by the time they get up there, they'll know me. I didn't think that I would meet her. It was just
Right.
more of a let me just
You
become a
you
known
you were
commodity.
looking at it as an upperclassman mentorship type of thing, and it just so happened that you had a great encounter.
Yeah, okay. And met her that weekend, and found out we lived a mile apart in New York City, and just really that day said we was going to be together, and we have been.
Mm.
So I think that's a definitely something that I look fondly upon, and I think the last also thing that I feel is something I look fondly on was Kemet wear,
Oh wow, take it back.
and I think
Take it back.
the birth of my entrepreneur bug and desire to own my own and start my own and make a difference in the world, I
Mhm.
think was also part of my accomplishment. And so, for those who don't remember, Kemet Wear was our T-shirt company that we founded junior year, and really it was a T-shirt company that focused on conscious Afrocentric designs that we would then go from campus to campus to campus selling those T-shirts, and we would go down to New York, pick up the designs, come back, sell them for more than we bought them for. And not only did it make us a little bit of money, not only did it get us to travel and be around different campuses, I think more importantly, it was the beginning of how to start and operate a business. And for many young people, that are interested in that entrepreneurial life, I refer back to that time in my life as well. You know what? Here's where I started my first business. Here's some of the lessons I learned. But at the end of the day, it was a good enough experience that has really inspired me for 30 years.
So with that, is and those are great recollections, and maybe it's a little bias on my part because I was a witness to all of them. And it's not just hearing you tell your story, but it's reliving it with you. And I can even think of several other accomplishments that you were tied to, but it comes with the understanding that at the time, some of what we were doing, we could not even have begin to think of those as what we would refer to as accomplishments. These were just things like we
Correct.
created out of the need or the lack thereof. When you talk about creating that hip hop show, that was what you wanted to hear, and it didn't exist, so you created it. The entrepreneur initiative and campaign was awesome, but it also came out of a consciousness that we were experiencing in our lives, personally, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, and felt strong enough about it to want to reflect it on our apparel, and knowing that if we felt that way, others would support it. And so, and some of that, I don't know if it would have happened if you had remained in Queens and I had remained in the Bronx, if it was because we were removed from our mainstream environment to now a different environment where we were so not mainstream and created that void. So I'm just curious, do you miss any of that? Is you look back to the 30 years and think about if I could do it over, or what do you miss about that time?
Man, um, I definitely. I mean, it's easy. The low hanging fruit to be to say I miss the freedom, because that was definitely rare to have that level of freedom. To be new to this idea that I can decide and make choices on my own and live on my own and come home when I want to. Um, that's definitely something you miss, because while I have that now, it's also coupled with incredible responsibilities. Where there, it was very little responsibilities to go with the same amount of freedom and self determination that I have now. I had then, it was just now I got bills to go along with it, um, which is different. You know that life is very different.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay.
I think the other thing that I miss, though, I think the biggest part that I miss, I think the friendships having like um, more access to your friends. So like these are people that you're seeing, spending a lot of time with on a daily basis. I think I miss that. Um, and then I also miss the discourse. I miss I think, I feel like I'm at a time where there's a lot of muting going on in conversations, to where there's not a lot of freedom of thought, freedom of expression. It's more of, you either think like me or I ain't hearing you. You either think like me or you are a X, fill in the blank of whatever that would be. Where there, I felt, and maybe because I was in a religion and philosophy, track, where just, or maybe it was the
It, it,
people I was
it,
around,
it welcomed that type of dialogue because it is
and
often put
challenging of perspective,
right.
to where, you know, I'm not necessarily looking for someone to agree and to live in this echo chamber where everyone around me repeats what I say. No, here's what I think. Here's why I think it. Let me hear what you got.
Yeah.
And now let's go back and forth in terms of why you think that way and why I think that way. And that to me is how I remember my college experience. Spent many a night up 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning just debating something. And I think there were a lot of new ideas also being generated at the time. I mean, we were being exposed to stuff that to me was very different. Like even through the Coalition of a Better World, where we were being asked to interact with these student groups who weren't necessarily advocating for the same things we were advocating for, but we were still charged with working with them, collaborating with them, do programming with them. To me, like that's the type of person that I've become in life, and I miss that, and I don't see that in a lot of situations. I really feel like, and maybe I'm more sensitive to it as I've got older, where when I was a little younger, people just referred to me as an ass, and I would just say whatever I wanted, and if you don't like it, so what?
Oh,
I've become a little more filtered in my, middle age years, and I feel like I have to because so much of who I am and what I think doesn't necessarily flow with certain groups, and as a um, as opposed to in the moment sometimes being referred to as that X, whatever that is, I'll just, you know what, you can have it and I'll move on because at the end of the day, you ain't really listening anyway.
you,
So,
you just become more strategic with what you choose to engage in
correct,
versus just engaging across the board with anybody who got something you want to engage about that I'm challenging.
correct.
Again, you become more refined. Like you become the sharpshooter instead of infantry.
Mm-hmm. Call me when you need me.
Right, holla. So we're definitely enjoying the rap so far, the walk down memory lane. We're gonna take a little break, get a word from our sponsor, and then catch us on the rebound
So
and
this episode is
bring on the
sponsored
rest of
by
the show.
Hope Murals. Hope Murals is a nonprofit that provides adolescent youth with an interactive experience of creative expression via an urban arts platform that stimulates both mental and physical development. Please visit their website at www.hopemurals.org to learn more and find ways you can support the work they do.
So we're back after a word from our sponsor with the legendary Mr. Alvin Glymph, and having a little walk down memory lane, the great days of Colgate University in Hamilton, New York.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, before we get back into some of those particulars, we always like to ask our guests a little something that's just, off the cuff, unrelated but related to the subject matter. But curious to know with, especially in Georgia, because Georgia, your girl Stacy is doing her thing, has been doing her thing, but
Yes.
you know, what's going on with all these efforts to radically change voting laws and create these obstacles and humps for folk that just coincidentally happen to target communities of color where there was a large blue vote in the last election. What's that all about, brother? What are they saying in the great lands of Georgia?
So there's, shout out to all my Georgia voters who came out and made a difference in this national election in November and then came back out in January because for many people, they doubted that we could even do it, that we'd ever do it. I've lived here long enough to know that at some point 20 something years ago, Georgia did have a Democrat governor. So it is evidence that Democrats can swing a state. We just haven't had it in a long time. So it was great to see, like, because literally people, whether it was on buses, whether it was rides, like people went the extra effort to help their fellow Georgia voter who needed help to actually get to the polls. I remember, the November election, I came out of the polls and saw a couple of brothers who had just voted in front of me. Um, Brothers had pants sagging to their knees. And I was like, wow, we got the pants saggers
Yeah,
voting.
yeah.
Yes, that was a great sign, right? Just shows you the level of effort and inroads in voter registration and then getting people out to vote. I definitely think that was a major effort. Because of that effort and because of that success, the people in control in this state decided to change the laws. And in an effort, in my opinion, to suppress votes because they felt like by changing these laws and making it more challenging to vote, they then would, the result would be less turnout, right? So definitely, and then even I think it also is a response to their base as their side lost. So they have to make an effort to do something to show that we're trying, we're fighting back. And it's based on this concept that this election was stolen that we've demonstrated that is not true.
Mhm.
So I recognize that this is the motivation and this is where it's coming from. I also, in my heart, believe that based on the um, voter turnout of November and January, and the response of what a mobilized strategic effort can do in terms of getting people registered and out to vote, that it ain't that big of a deal. That I really expect that the other side, the Democrats, the progressives, will use this as a motivating tool, a way to fundraise, as a way to mobilize, as a way to orchestrate even greater efforts to
Mm-hmm.
get people the identification that they need, to get people the water that they need before they get online, to, like, while there were changes to the law, to me, what I'm exposed to, the majority of them are overcomable, whether it's with some effort or some assistance. And I think both of them will occur as we go forward. And
Mm-hmm.
what I think they tried to their demise was a strategy of the past, and said, well, you know what? Maybe if we try to scare them, they won't come back out to vote. And,
That ain't
maybe
work.
that might have worked in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Who
Right.
knows? But
Right.
we're in a different era.
Yeah.
And I think there would have been better strategies to attempt, if I was them. To this, all you're doing is poking a bear.
Yeah.
And I think it's only
Provoking.
going to get more people provoking them, to where people in Georgia, many voters of color, typically take a year or two or three off of voting and then come back to the presidential election.
Right.
To where now I'm in barbershops, people are saying, man, we coming right back out in January or June. And, like, they're like, no, we
Right.
on it. And I
Right.
think, based on the fact that people saw that voting works, so this is why I would have been like, yo, don't even do this, because now you're messing with a group that has just realized that this effort actually provides and produces results.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why would you then want to motivate and provoke that person who now understands that this works? Now you're just gonna give
Mm-hmm.
them another reason to come back out and vote. So, at the end of the day, I look at it as, what people like. It's politics. It's the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're in power, you have the ability to do stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
And but at the end of the day, it's not going to serve them well, because I think the response from the group will be more than they expected.
Interesting. Interesting. So, with that being said, and that sets a great stage for who you are now and who have you been. I know Al has worn many hats, but I've always seen that you're a lifer in terms of an educator working in all aspects of higher ed, to nonprofit organizations, to the county now, major school district leadership role. um I'm curious, is that political context and the idea of civic engagement that's running rampant throughout Georgia something that is also, is there an education responsibility that leadership throughout the state, at the state level, Department of Ed, as well as various counties, are having talks about how that becomes almost part of, when we were young, you had tech schools, you wanted to be a plumber, you had to be a mechanic, you had home economics classes. Is civic engagement something from a curriculum perspective that educational leaders are discussing, at least what you're hearing?
Definitely. And at least in the district I work in, it's becoming a prominent, um, conversation of the experience of a high school student and a middle school student, because we want voting to really be the fulfillment of this journey of civic engagement, as opposed to beginning of civic engagement, so that they really are getting a true understanding of how do you run for office, how to mobilize, how to put a group together, and then actually see a change in your community. And then voting is just part of that. So yes, it's definitely becoming more and more part of our conversations.
Nice, nice, nice. So talk a little bit about, we say who you are now, but who you are now post Colgate is 30 years of who you are. Make the connection between who you've been and where that road has gone for Brother Glymph.
So, I mean, I've definitely have in 30 years lived an amazingly diverse life. To your point, I've worn many hats. I mean, along with being a family man, along with being an entrepreneur and having Glymph and Associates in my business, I've been part owner of a club. I've authored a novel. I've been on AM radio. I've been on internet radio, the podcast that we're doing now. So, like, just in terms of some of my tangential stuff, has been some real interesting, cool experiences in my life. But I think when you look at post Colgate, I came to Atlanta to really be a teacher, to be an educator, and ended up going to Emory for graduate school and realized that teaching wasn't for me. And ultimately, before quitting and going back home to New York because I thought I was a failure, my mentor in graduate school convinced me to look into research and data as another way to be connected to education. And had coming out of religion major Colgate, I had no experience at all with data. And fortunately, my experiences at Emory, this Margaret Beal Spencer was my mentor. Shout out to Dr. Spencer, taught me all that I need to know about data, research, program evaluation, so that it really has been the basis of how I have provided for my family and made a brand as this data dude in Atlanta for the last 30 years. And back then, 30 years ago, there weren't many program evaluators generally. Definitely wasn't a lot of black program evaluator data dudes. So it was pretty easy to have this brand of funders who were young or even African Americans in charge who knew that program evaluation was something that all nonprofits, foundations needed to support me, try to and give me opportunities to get in there and shine because there weren't a lot of black program evaluators. So I started from Emory, learning the craft, graduated with my master's, immediately jumped into Georgia State, working at the Applied Research Center, doing program evaluation and working on major research projects there. And that's really where I just learned, went from theory to practice and making it a business. And I can understand just from a technical assistance consultant perspective, because that's
Mm-hmm.
really what the center was offering, how this could be very lucrative. And after 8 years of managing those projects, I said, I need to open up my own business and just get a small slice of some of those projects.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, the birth of Glymph and Associates. And so, Glymph and Associates is a business, that I created, owned by me and my wife, 2001, and we've been running strong ever since and have had major universities, nonprofits, foundations as our client list, and we are still going strong. And really the last 5 years have been the best 5 years of its existence. And don't know how long Glymph and Associates will run its course, but it definitely has been, one, the fulfillment of my dream of owning my own business, having a business that had my family name on it. And so I'm very proud of being the founder and president of Glymph and Associates. Um, from there, Project Grad is where I took an 8 year stint of working for a nonprofit doing data for them. And I think Project Grad is what increased and really nurtured my servant leadership spirit. And I think it was there that I really appreciated this idea of there you owed people who poured into you, and that there were so many other people and kids that needed that inspiration, that spark to go off to post-secondary success. And while we know from our experience what Colgate or a college or brand or going to a university can do for changing your life, so many other kids don't. And I think that's what Project Grad taught me, is that you it's not just about getting a college degree, really. If we are really trying to make a difference in these kids' lives, then what we need to do is help them understand the value of education so that they can pursue it. Because the data is clear, the more education you have in a community, the more wealthy and successful that community will be. So if we are trying to transform and improve
Mm-hmm.
communities, for me, what that meant is get more education into those communities. So Project Grad helped me understand that and process that, and then develop this brand as this college dude. So I
Mm-hmm.
became a data guy, but also someone who really, 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 really cares about all kids being given an opportunity to go off for post-secondary success. I'm really got two major hats. One is I work for a school district, third largest school district in the state, where I'm overseeing their grants and partnerships and have a great opportunity to help and even a larger scale, more families, more students in just a different way, in a different seat, bringing resources to the table and bringing partners to the table to help their work. And then this other seat that I've been building and crafting for like last 10 years is this life of a creator.
Mm.
And from craft, from, you know, penning that all in the novel with Gina, Tourist in Your Own Town, available on Amazon.
Yeah.
We are now in the place where we are trying to adapt that novel to a TV series. And so, having sat in that seat over the last year, and again, in kind of this um, ratcheting up this seat of a creator from not just, okay, now you're an author, now you're trying to be a person who tells stories visually and even on a grander scale is where my path is headed. And so to be that guy is really, I think, when we talk about who we are as Colgate alum, I really look at it as that's who this guy who was doing this radio show with really figuring out that communication, interacting with people, telling a story, sharing hip hop. That's who this guy was really trying to figure out who he was. And 30 years later, this is who that same guy is he's trying to push forward this culture of hip hop to more and more and more people the way I see it, the way people like me see it, understanding that there's others who see it differently, and that's cool, but I'm just trying to create my lane. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of who I am now.
I definitely think that the creative spirit has always existed within you. I think that you just had a chance to use the platforms that you had at the times they were available. So the radio station was that platform, you know, the student organization. I remember you being heavily involved in the Prism, which was the student of color newspaper at Colgate, and you had a column, and Gina was an editor, I think her senior year or junior year, you know. So that was another platform. Your student activism with Coalition for a Better World, you know, that gave you another platform. But you've always been that storyteller, and that is in essence what hip hop is. It's the urban version of, you know, what historically our ancestors always did. They passed the verbal tradition of our history and facts in dance and song, and so you've just evolved as technology has evolved, and
Mm.
as industries have evolved. So it's no surprise that your book comes from your footsteps, and now this TV show comes from the book of those footsteps, and the podcast comes from your footsteps of 30 years. So it's no surprise. You're just connecting the dots with your storytelling. With that being said, and it's a great story. Um, what would you say to a 21-year-old Alvin Glymph now at the ripe old age of 50? Are you 50? You're in the 50 club, right? You're in the 50 club?
50.
50
I
club?
just turned 51 actually.
Right, 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 right. But once you get 50, you really don't keep counting individual digits after that. You just 50, and then like we'll talk again when you hit 60, and then, you
Right.
know, maybe 65, because that's a category in the government. You know, I think you become eligible for certain things. But so yeah, what would you tell the 21-year-old, which I kind of feel like you know already, because you got a Alvin Benjamin Glymph that is, you know, your shadow. So
I think my I think my conversation would focus on assessing who you are and then doing you. And that doing you is going to not necessarily coincide with what other people see for you, and that's okay. But still, assess who you are, where you want to go, and then do you. And I would also encourage them to serve and give back. And I think as a society, like that's something to me that is important for the collective. That this don't really work if we all just out there looking out for ourselves. So even though I'm saying do you, as in do what's best for you, I hope that what's best for you is looking out for others because again, that's what's best for the collective. So I've always been a person who's done me, and even though doing me still meant taking care of others, but it also I thought that's what is who I was and honored who I was. So that would really be what I focused on, and I would also tell them to um, pay attention, like to the small things, or like like look at the flowers, or like just to stay in the moment, and but understand that these moments change fast, and that in really in life, how you see life can be really, really different in a second. Like whether it's somebody dies, whether it's a car accident, whether it's a job opportunity, whether it's firing, like a baby, pregnant, like from one second to the other, your life and your perspective could be different for the rest of your life. And so you have to, when you understand that, then you really should, second by second, moment by moment, hour by hour, not take it for granted and just soak it all up, understanding that it ain't gonna come back.
You mentioned your first bit of advice was to assess, I guess, who you are was what you were saying. What I think that's one of those things that it's a great word and everybody understands it, but not everybody process what it means to assess the same way. Sometimes we say we're our worst critics. I've always said that you can bullshit to everybody, but you can't bullshit to yourself. When you put your head down on
Yep.
the pillow at night and it's just you and your soul and your thoughts, were you true to who you say you are, or were you full of shit about it? And so, what does that assessment sound like for you?
In terms of who am I?
When you say to your
Oh,
21-year-old self, I
so
would
I would
challenge you
I would
to assess, what would that entail?
I would say it would entail thinking about your values, your characteristics, what really matters to you.
Mm.
Think about who you're trying to make proud. Take that into consideration. Who is it in your life that their opinion of you matters? And that list
Hmm.
shouldn't be that long,
Right,
in my
right,
opinion. That
right.
list should be on your hand. And because I really believe the best way to live is to think most people's opinions of you don't matter. And if when you, I was telling my mother-in-law not too long ago that I think one of my gifts is truly understanding what matters, what doesn't, and then treating them appropriately. And I think what that has allowed me to be over the years is a person that has a certain level of serenity that, and I based that off of my grandmother above her stove used to have the serenity prayer,
Hmm.
which is like, God, give me um the wisdom, like to understand what I can change, and like the discernment to understand like what I don't, or something like that. I can't
Yeah,
remember the
yeah,
exact
yeah.
phrase, but you've seen the serenity
Hmm.
prayer. But in essence though, what it drilled in became this idea of that you can't control everything. You really can't. There's some things that you can control, and I can't say I've always in that moment and in that space of understanding what I can and cannot control. But the things you cannot control, you really should not worry too much about because you
Yeah.
can't do much about it. And I think the worry, the stress, the anxiety often comes from things that we have no control over. And
Hmm.
to me, what I'm better than I think most people at is acknowledging that I can't control that.
Hmm.
And so I'm not really worrying about that too
And so
much.
you surrender to it.
I
Hmm.
surrender to it and just say, I think a better use of my time is focusing on what I can control.
Hmm.
and worrying about that. And hopefully, what I can control will be good enough to make my life a very pleasurable, happy life. Although that's not the case either, because sometimes life just doesn't work out that way.
Yeah, yeah.
All in
But
all, though, I think it should just be a person really just looking in the mirror and thinking about what matters most, and then putting a plan and activating a plan in their mind, writing it down, whatever works for them, to go after it.
mhm,
Because what I really believe is that so much of what we want in life is achievable if we are willing to put the work, effort,
mhm,
sacrifice, that diligence, consistency to get it.
yeah,
I think that plays a big role. So I say think about where you want to be and then go after it. And also part of that assessment in terms of who you are, I think it involves understanding who your network is
mhm, mhm,
and who you can access to help assist you get to where you want to get to. And I
yeah,
think that too is the advice I would offer a 21-year-old is think about who you are and that ecosystem is still part of you. Activate that as well.
yeah, yeah. I recently saw a quote that really has resonated with me to the point where I wrote it on my bathroom mirror as a reminder every day that can be applied to various aspects of one's life. And it goes something like, "You will not always be motivated, so you must learn to be disciplined." And
Yes.
so it really is simple, but makes a lot of sense that it goes to your point about having clarity about what you want your life to be about, and then just having a plan and a strategy, and then more importantly, executing. Because execution is really what is where the work comes into play, and you reap those benefits.
And I think so many people overlook the value of execution and think oftentimes it's just circumstances that happen to someone being where they are in life. And I just pulled up a quote from Denzel Washington, and it's between goals and achievement is discipline and consistency,
Mm,
right? And
nice.
so those are the types of, you know, that's the concept that I think helps me again control and what I
Hmm.
can't. What I can control is how disciplined and consistent I am.
Right, right, right,
That's something that
right,
is I worry about.
right.
And so,
Absolutely.
and have fun.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
man, enjoy life, man. Work hard, play harder
Now, would
is
you say
what I
you
would
knew
tell
these things
everybody.
at 21, or this is what you're saying now, and that you would be
I think
advising
working
yourself at
hard,
21?
yeah. I think working hard and play harder is something I knew at 21.
Okay.
That and I think so much of who we are, what we know at that age, has a lot to do with who we are exposed to, right?
Yeah.
The elders or the people in our community. And I definitely would say my family, my elders, um, instilled in me this idea that you need to work hard and play harder.
Yeah. So, with that being said, final question here. What would you want to promote and share with the Colgate fam, the Alumni of Color fam? Is there anything you want to give a heads up, a hot, sneak peek
Yeah.
at? Let them know.
Um, well, definitely want to appreciate you for joining me in this journey after Gate. So, this is just the beginning. Looking forward to and doing more and more of these, and appreciate you joining me on this journey. I think the other part is definitely check out the Tourist in Your Own Town, the book
Yes, sir.
on Amazon by Alvin Glymph and Gina Glymph. Check out our website, glymphandassociates.com. That's Glymph, A-N-D, associates with an S.com. Also hit me up, Alvin Glymph, at Alvin Glymph on Twitter. That's definitely another way to get at me, though I'm not as active as I used to be. But other than that, man, I just want to promote this idea of um, just like being a good person and making the world better for people behind us. I'd like to promote that.
For sure. We call that the legacy, my brother. The
Yes, sir.
legacy,
That's
the
the
legacy
legacy.
lives. The legacy lives. So with that, It's been a great 60-minute walk down memory lane with you, brother. Looking forward to this Aftergate journey as another part of our storytelling, and just look forward to engaging with more incredible folk. Some of which we know, some of which we haven't heard from in a while. Some will be learning about for the first time. And so we ask everyone to stay tuned and join us and spread the love, spread the word. Aftergate, get on it.
Peace.